r/AskReddit by Robotainment. How would you feel about a law that requires people over the age of 70 to pass a specialized driving test in order to continue driving? That's a great idea. I'm going to call my 68-year-old congressman and ask him to support such legislation. Edit. Most driving laws are passed by state legislators who usually do drive themselves. Here in Illinois, my grandpa had to do it every year after 75. I think older drivers definitely need to be retested and have restrictions put on their licenses to driving at night, driving only within certain distances of the home, driving above certain speeds, etc. up to and including revocation if found to be impaired to significant degree. And I'm staring down 70 myself. In Japan, they have special decals that identify new drivers and the elderly, which I think is a good thing. If you see someone with an elderly tag, you might not assume that driver sees everything you do or reacts as quickly as you do. I had trouble getting my dad to quit driving because I knew he couldn't see. He couldn't tell me from my daughter from across the room. I called the DMV for suggestions and they sent him a letter to come in for a vision test. He passed. He was in his 90s with cataracts and dementia. We had a lot of rancor over this issue and he ended up living with my brother, whom he would actually listen to, and he quit driving. Ugh, please. My grandma is practically blind and went to take her driving vision test to renew her license. She failed, but the lady at the DMV felt bad, so she had her take it again and gave her hints so she could pass it. So now my practically blind grandma is out on the road still. It's for their safety as much as anyone else's. I'm so mad that the lady at the DMV was so irresponsible as to let her keep driving. That's the kind of thing that should get you fired from the DMV, if not charged with a criminal offense. Old retired guy here, 0.74 years old to be precise. I would accept such a test, provided it was only to catch really age-related diseases, dementia, poor reflexes, etc. I live in a retirement community and most of the people who should not have a license have already given them up. The first day I was here, I heard a conversation between two guys. Guy 1, I just turned 88 and turned in my driver's license. Guy 2, why would you do that? Guy 1, I don't want to spend the rest of my life in jail. I'm all for retesting people, however, I'm not sure what you mean by specialized. The requirements for good driving don't change with age, so it should be the same test. Maybe he means a few preliminary questions before even getting near a vehicle. Can we make everyone take it? Seriously, I see more horrible drivers in the commuting age bracket than in the retired age bracket. Ideally, we'd all be retested every 10 years or so until we hit 60, then we're retested every 5 years. However, older folks are a huge voting bloc and it's unlikely this would ever pass. I'd be okay with it if over 70 drivers are statistically more likely to get into accidents. I just looked it up for the US. I found a 2012 report. www.ourfoundation.org link 16 to 19 has the highest number of accidents, and then the rate decreases until 70. From 70 on, the rate of accidents start increasing again, but they never get back to the 16 to 19-year-old rate. Let me say this about that. The neighbor I love is 93 and still driving. When she's up to it, she can barely see the on/off switch on her vacuum cleaner. Should she be driving? I want her to maintain independence, but at the same time, I don't think it's safe for her or others. Yet the DMV doesn't require her to take a vision exam or a competency test. And that's why adoption of self-driving cars is so important. It would provide so much more independence for the elderly and disabled. Everyone should take a standardized road test every 5 years. Maybe every 10 would be more appropriate. I honestly couldn't face the prospect of losing my license every 5 years. I'd be okay with this if all DMVs were like Utah, with the DL division being separated, as it were, spending 30 fucking hours getting my license, and plates in Las Vegas no test required. I can't condone any requirement including this one or voter ID that forces people to go to the DMV. I send patients for driver's evaluations if their ability to navigate through my office is concerningly questionable. Unaware drivers are just as dangerous as impaired drivers. I work with the olds for a living. The frequency that they casually drop my doctor told me I can't drive anymore, coupled with the fact that they drove to my office, is terrifying. One woman could barely walk, who also told me she couldn't see while I was demonstrating something to her, got in her car and drove away after her appointment. There's another man who constantly tells us he donated his car to someone who needed it, but regrets it because he has to take the bus everywhere. The Sun told us they literally had to take it away because he kept driving on sidewalks and running lights, and he refused to stop driving after his license was suspended for drunk driving. I watched another woman just YOLO pull away from the curb as she was leaving, nearly causing a multi-car pileup. One woman came in because she had head trauma from an accident she caused. She drove herself. Oh, also I've also had my bumper smashed in by a patient just trying to park in the spot next to me. I get a full dose of their cognitive skills in my office. There are many times I'm pleasantly surprised at how sharp they still are, but more often than not I'm afraid for those who are sharing the road with them on their way home. While I agree they do deserve the dignity of having the same rights as everyone else, I do not believe that right should supersede the safety of literally anyone else on the road with them. All for it. When I was 14, my friend was coming to my house, and he got killed by my next door neighbor who happened to be elderly. My friend was on his skateboard, and he was just up the street from my house. From the position of his body and where elderly guy stopped his car, I could see he made a super sharp left turn that killed him and ran over my other friend. The other friend survived and recovered from his injuries, but my other friend not so lucky. Oh, and my granddad has Alzheimer's and frequently forgets where he is, and I think he still has his license, though my grandma finally took his keys. Ontario has testing every 2 years for 80 plus. 70 is a bit young for that. Honestly, edit. I'm surprised at how vehemently everyone disagrees with me that 70 is a bit young. It may be true that I just happen to know a lot of abnormally strong and healthy older people, but most of the 70 plus I know in no way fit the sickly, doddering image I think a lot of us have of the elderly. Just like the majority of 20 and under don't fit the irresponsible, reckless image a lot of people have of kids. According to these admittedly old stats, www.alcantris.org linked the vast majority of traffic fatalities are caused by younger people. A better solution is to test everyone every few years and have stricter medical conditions for everyone. We need statistics to show us which demographics cause the most accidents over distance driven. If the over 70 leads in this, then yes. I looked it up for the US. www.ourfoundation.org linked the rate of accidents does start going up after 70. However, the age group with the most accidents is 16 to 19. So even people 85 plus are less likely to get into accidents than new drivers. My fiance's brother was killed riding his motorcycle Sunday by a 91-year-old who pulled out in front of him. He left behind a wife and 3 children. He was the one of the best guys I ever met. We are all devastated, and it could have been prevented. That man had no business behind the wheel. I ride a motorcycle and almost got hit by an elderly woman going the wrong way down a one-way street a few months ago. I was honking and waving my hands, and she was blissfully unaware of my existence. I managed to swerve off to the side with enough room to spare, but what if I had a bigger bike and wouldn't have been able to? We ended up going to the same place, and when I asked her if she knew she was going the wrong way, and if she even saw me, she said, "Oh no dear, I was going the right way, you were just speeding." I was literally going less than 10 miles per hour because I was getting ready to turn, and even if I was, did she plan on just mowing me down? It's ridiculous that she was so oblivious to what actually happened and still got behind the wheel of a car and drove home. I'm so sorry for your loss. That's really terrible. I'm gonna drop my pegs for him tomorrow. I live in a town that caters to older people, and watching them drive is painful. By them, I mean end of middle age and up. From going 30 km/h in a 70 km/h zone to watching them stare out the side window while going through that same zone. They swerve from side to side. I refuse to go anywhere with my grandpa driving, as he is now a horrible driver and has nearly crashed the car multiple times, then blames it on other drivers. However, I won't say that only elderly people need to be tested. I would hate having to do so, but we all should be tested. Just last night teenagers drove over a school's fence in a large truck. People saw them, cops haven't caught them. Younger people speed more, usually 70 and a 50. In just today, I got stuck behind someone doing 20 kmph in a 50 zone, and then while I was going 60 kmph someone flew past me, like I was standing still. The roads would be better if we were all retested, and in regards to my town, if cops would actually do their job. Going severely under the speed limit is dangerous just as speeding is. As an insurance professional, just because you have been doing something for a long time does not mean you are good at it. Drivers should be tested every 5 years, not just once you hit a certain age. People should have to retake the driver's test every 10 years if not 20. I've seen too many terrible drivers of all ages. By the time the law was passed, self-driving cars will be available. And I'd be all for it. You know how often I get berated or threatened by geriatrics when I strongly suggest that they quit driving because they no longer meet the legal requirements for driving. Honestly, thank you for at least suggesting it. Elderly drivers are so rampant in FL that I'm literally scared to drive because one of them may kill me someday. One already disabled my mother for a number of years. Cop here. I can only speak from my experience, but I've dealt with many more crashes involving teens to 30s than elderly folks. Mostly because the younger folks are balls deep in their phones. I'm born and raised in New York City, and my career is in the judicial system. I've seen it all. I see plenty of seniors on their phones behind the wheel, and they're even more dangerous in these situations because their ability to multitask and their proficiency at utilizing technology like smartphones is vastly inferior to that of millennials. Secondly, as far as I can tell, the op wasn't insinuating that younger folks, particularly males, 18 to 34 aren't more likely to have collisions. He's just bringing attention to the fact that something needs to be done about seniors not having more strict laws to abide by to retain their DLs. And he has a point. I'm not quite sure what your declarative statement concerning your personal experience has to do with any of that. For it, the inability for old people to drive would result in them voting en masse for public transportation improvements. The inability of old people to drive would result in them voting in en masse to restore their ability to drive, changing nothing. I'd be all for it if we can compensate them by providing transportation to those who can no longer drive for low cost. Self-driving cars may soon fit this position. Finally, a rational take on the issue. This comment needs much more attention. If we take away their licenses before we implement a way for them to get to the doctor, grocery store, church, and any other place they need to go, we end up fixing one issue and creating many others. Public transit can be a solution in many areas, but huge portions of retired folks move to semi-rural communities in the southeast and southwest. Economically speaking, there would be huge hurdles to overcome. My grandma rear-ended a line of stopped cars on the highway at full speed, no brakes, with my 5-year-old brother in the car because she thought she saw a deer on the side of the road. She's been in another, less serious wreck and has come to a dead stop while on the highway because she forgot where she was going multiple times since then. My dad had to unplug her battery and tell her that her car doesn't work anymore, so she would start asking for rides. I would love if they took age into account in some way. I'm not an expert on anything, so I don't know how they would do it, so that families wouldn't have to be torn between treating their elders like a child or worrying if they're going to get a call from the hospital anytime they're behind the wheel. It's all the fucktards on their phones driving that need specialized schooling. My 70-year-old dad can drive circles around those dipshits. Then he'd have no problem passing a test. Or how about you just have to do a refresher course every 10 years? There are a lot of people out there with fully functional senses that still need a reminder about the rules of the road. Important. But in my opinion, the real shitty drivers are 18 to 25-year shitheads. The law has to be merciless against fast and the furious wanabes. I want everyone to retest every 5 years, period, and I want the test to actually be both relevant to real driving and failable if you suck. I think it would be a very good idea. Elderly people, especially those who have lived to be 70, tend to have very poor control over their motor skills that would be vital for operating a vehicle. It's hard enough to book a driving test these days. It takes a good 4 months in the UK. This would worsen the situation. In my opinion, driving tests in the US need to be more difficult and have the driver face most every scenario with at least 2 versions of each. In addition, this should have to be renewed every like 5 or 10 years with your DL. I'm a fire engine driver in Ox/LA/NCA, and there are too many drivers Garden Grove and Clap that don't know to pull over and just stop or try and make their turn before we catch up. Car accidents are the leading fatality for a reason. Secret to old life like Japan, better driving habits and rules. This has been tried, but the organizations like AARP are very powerful and shoot down this type of legislation. Over 70? My aunt started getting dementia at 58 and should have had her license taken then and there. Test us every 10 years or with referral from a document. Based on the state of driving I see every day, everyone should have to pass a driver's test every 5 years. Like and subscribe for good luck, you handsome gentleman.